Evening, everybody. Um, right, we will begin. I see this script in front of me. Um, Good evening and welcome to the Audit and Standards Committee meeting of Melton Borough Council. We're reminded that we will be using the audio visual system this evening and the meeting will be recorded. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays, which we all know. Can we also make sure that these microphones are directly at us? Because sometimes if people are hard of hearing, it is difficult. So if everybody would do that, please. Please switch mobile phones off, which I have done. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting or include any filming or recording of the public seating area. I haven't got my glasses on, have I? I am Councillor Holmes, which we think you know. I will chair the meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. I confirm we have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance: Dawn Garton, Clive Tobin, Rachel Ashley Court, Adam Green, and also joining us, Helen Langton. External audit for Grant Thompson. I have apologies from David Chubb, Councillor Chubb, who can't be here. And then I think I will also thank both the chair and vice chair who were doing this up until a very good job up until now. So anything that they can help me with, then I will be happy to be helped. Thank you, Councillor Higgins and Mason. To confirm the minutes of the last meeting, are there any thing that we need to, anything that we have problem with? Sorry, yes.
I don't have a problem as such, but just a question really. Minute 47 under urgent business. I noticed there was an undertaking given, I think implied, and
Right.
I just wondered if that has come to fruition or not, and what the state of play is on that. Oh, it's number 47.
Number 47.
It's the thing that Councillor Mason raised, and all members were in favour of this suggestion, and that acknowledge that it worked very well last year and we should continue to do it. So it's just a question really on the minutes.
Yeah, right, thank you. Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, Chair, I can confirm that I did produce the document on the the self-assessment document. I did circulate it to whoever was members of the committee at that time, and it was approved.
Can we have a show of hands, or are we going to use our? We can show of hands if you like, if you prefer.
I'm Chair. I'm happy to move the minutes.
Yeah. A seconder for the minutes. Thank you. I thought actually that's what you were doing. But right. Well, would you like to use the mechanical? I don't like using it, but I will. But agreed. Yeah, I thought we were voting. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So are we going to vote mechanically or are we going to vote by hand? Hand then. Hands. Show of hands. I can't vote because I wasn't on the committee. We are voting for or against. Anybody against? Right, thank you. That is carried. We've had two.
Madam Chair, I abstain because I wasn't on the committee, so I won't.
Yeah, well, same here. Right, thank you. So we are in agreement. Thank you, who were on the committee. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a declaration of interest. It's just if the meeting hasn't finished by about 7:30, I have an Armed Forces welfare event to go to, so I'll leave the chamber around that time.
Right, we move to item 4, annual report of procurement. Dawn Garton, the Director of Corporate Services. I'll put it to you. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. This report is a useful piece of assurance for the committee, setting out what procurement exemptions from contract procedure rules were applied in the financial year 2025-26. The full list is contained in the appendix and provides the value and rationale for each of the exemption. Those applied are relatively low value and provide genuine reasons for the exemptions. I'm happy to take questions, but I may need to refer back to the relevant service or procurement if there's any specific questions on any of the exemptions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just on page 17, where it says the reinstatement of the Country Park Bridge. So sound business case. Was this where it says the value for just under £57,000? This was before the 31st of March, so the award was on the basis of the mitigation of risk. Can you confirm that for me? That's all. That was between that year, 1st of April and the 31st of March.
That's correct.
Thank
yes.
you. Oh, sorry. A second. So, in effect, the bridge was ordered before the 31st of March.
The procurement process, well, there was an exemption, so the exemption was approved before the 31st of March, and as it says there, that's for Melton Borough Council's element of that, because the rest was covered by an insurance claim.
And that just involved the officer Michelle Howard. Wasn't any cabinet decision or member before the 31st of March. It was the officer. It'd all been in place and the officer decided that.
It was an officer decision, but of course there would have been consultation with all the relevant statutory officers, procurement, etc. All would feed into the relevance or appropriateness and approval of that before Michelle, as the relevant director, made the final sign off of that exemption. But in as well on exemptions, it also requires specifically myself and the monitoring officer to sign off exemptions.
Councillor Audit.
Just to provide some added assurance, of course, the cabinet, which I was leader at the time, were fully briefed on this, and of course, part of the delay was initially because we had to get the agreement, indeed the permission of the Environment Agency, because of the bridge was in the watercourse, and we had to. Sorry. Oh yes, yeah, absolutely the same thing. And of course, we wanted to ensure that the bridge was future-proof, because we didn't want to just replace like with like, which would have been very easy, and we had to build on it, for the future, and not leave a sort of a further possibility of flooding, removing it, and herding the insurers together, and the Environment Agency. And of course, we also wanted to ensure that as far as possible, we could place the order with local local companies, at least in Leicestershire. You can't always get a bridge builder in Melton, I understand, but in Leicestershire, that was the aim at the time. So, yeah, I can assure Councillor Higgins that all the stops were pulled out to get it over the line as soon as possible. Thank you.
I'm just checking if there's any more questions. Otherwise, it's over to members to vote accordingly.
Could I have a proposer? Seconder? Right. You got them down. Thank you. Or internal audit now, which is item 5.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just introduce the report. So on an annual basis, I'm required under the internal audit standards and the CITFA Code of Practice to provide the Audit Committee with an annual assurance opinion. So that opinion should be based on the Council's governance, risk and control framework, and it's informed by the work of internal audit throughout the year and the work that we've delivered in terms of your audit plan. So this report provides you with that opinion for 25-26. So the opinion is set out for you on page 31 of your pack, page 3 of the appendix. So the opinion I've given is of moderate assurance. So that is consistent with previous years. And the rest of the report provides the basis for that opinion. It's primarily, as I say, the work of internal audit. So the work that I have reported to to this committee throughout the financial year. So the majority of those have been reported in my progress reports. But this brings all of that together for you in the report this evening. So within the report, there is a summary on page 34 of the pack, which sets out all of the assurance opinions that have been given throughout the financial year and a comparator with the previous year. Table 3 on page 36 of the pack provides a more detailed breakdown of each of the audits and the opinions that were given for each of those, and the committee date at which they were reported as well as part of the progress reporting. Also factoring into my opinion is the implementation of actions. So table 4 on page 37 of the pack, page 9 of the appendix, provides you with an overview, which again is reported as part of progress reporting, but this is a snapshot for you as at the 31st of March of actions that have been completed during 2025-26 and any which were overdue for completion at that point. There is an updated position on this in my next agenda item later on today, so I won't go into those further in detail, but you have that updated position as at June in that report. Also within the report is a reference to any other sources of assurance that I've referred to. So page 38 of the pack, page from part 4.8 of the paper refers to the assurances on the Leicestershire ICT partnership, and also includes some coverage on the section 106 external review that's been undertaken. Members may recall who were on the committee last year that this was included in the audit plan. It was decided that because of this external review that was already underway, that we wouldn't conduct the internal audit review. But on the basis that you didn't receive that assurance, I wanted to make sure that you had some insight into that external work. So there you have a summary of that this evening for you on, as I say, in section 4 of the report, page 38 of your pack. We do have we have postponed that audit, but it is in the audit plan for 26-27. So we will report back to the committee on the outcome of that once that's completed. Also within the report is some update on the delivery of the internal audit service ourselves. So we have delivered your internal audit plan with the exception of the audits that we were requested to delay until Q4 or later. So I can confirm that of the 2 reports that were not finalised at the time of producing this progress report, so the housing allocations and homelessness and the stockyard project, the housing allocations and homelessness audit has concluded. The draft report has been issued, and I'm really pleased to be able to inform the committee that as that was an audit that had received limited assurance in the previous financial year, we've actually noted a big improvement in terms of the controls in this area. So that will be summarised for you in your next progress report from me. But as I say, you haven't got the final opinion in the report today, but I can give you the assurance that has improved significantly from the previous year. The other audit that remains ongoing is around the stockyard project. So again, that will be factored into your future progress reporting, and I'll report back to this committee as soon as that is concluded. So I think it's of note that the committee didn't receive any assurance opinions of less than moderate assurance during 25-26, as is shown as in those tables that I mentioned, Table 1 and Table 3. You've also received no audits with an opinion of high organisational impact, which would again impact on my assurance opinion, hence being able to remain at a moderate assurance opinion overall. The implementation rate has dropped, so where I've mentioned Table 4, the rate there is lower in terms of implementation than in previous years. And I know it is something that the committee has commented on during the year as part of that progress reporting, and something that I'm sure the committee will continue to review. We've also, in the performance information, provided you with an update on actions arising from our external assessment. So members of the committee who were on the previous committee will recall that we had an external quality assessment which was reported in full to this committee in 2025. We had some actions arising from that, even though it gave us the highest assurance opinion that was possible in terms of ratings on our compliance with the standards. So I've just, for full transparency, given you an update on the actions arising from that in the additional appendix this evening. So that's for you from page 47 of the pack as Appendix B. Finally, within the report is an update on counter-fraud activity. So from page 43 of the pack is an update on fraud referrals that we received through the report fraud mailbox. This is reviewed daily by the internal audit team, and we refer those as appropriate. I've given a breakdown, a high-level breakdown of the outcomes of those items that have come through to us. I've also at section 6.3 on page 44 provided an update on outcomes from the single person discount exercise, which we participate in as part of the National Fraud Initiative. So as a result of that, to date, 63 claims have been withdrawn and backdated with a total value of 48,552 in terms of that council tax collection pot. So that is a walkthrough of the key sections of the report, Chair. As I said, most of the reports that are mentioned here have been reported to the Audit Committee throughout the financial year in 25-26. Those that have been finalised since my last progress report in March are included in the progress report later on the agenda today. So that might be a better point to ask for any questions on the details of those reports, if that's appropriate. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I think life gets more difficult in finance, doesn't it? It looks to me like it gets more difficult anyway. If there are any. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, and it's a point of reference, really. On table 1, page 34, I noticed that very helpfully, and I do like comparisons, as you know, Rachel, but the comparators there for 2024-2025 as against the last year's comparators, the range is different, somewhat different. If you look, there's that the moderate assurances have gone up and broadly stay the same, but the moderate assurances have gone up, but the two outliers, the 15%, which were very good, and the 8%, which were not so good, shall we say, limited. Is there any explanation for that, do you think, that why the range is sort of bunched up in the middle rather than being spread? Because I think, if I remember correctly, that the last comparator that I saw was broadly the same. That's just a comment, that's all. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yes, so I think it is useful to have the comparator, and that's why we include it every year. And as you say, you can refer back and see how the pattern's changed. I think it's important to note that you haven't had any limited assurance reports this year, so that is certainly a positive. But as you say, it's come more into those two categories, and you've lost the outliers of the stronger assurance and the weaker ones. Whilst we do have the comparator, it's not always a direct comparator because we are auditing completely different areas every year. So it's not that we've audited the same things and they've been much worse this year. It is comparing different areas and different controls. So in some areas, we may look at riskier areas in one year than we look at another. So there may be we would associate a lower level of risk with those. Overall, as I've said, you've not received any of high organisational impact. So there's nothing to raise of concern. But clearly, we would like to see more moving towards that good rating rather than the moderate. So at the moment, it is moving towards that, but it hasn't quite crept into the limited. So yeah, I think hopefully that's a bit of commentary. But as I say, it's not a direct comparison, but I think it's useful as an average to compare.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Just,
Oh,
oh,
right.
sorry, am I?
I thought
No,
you
no,
saw-
no. Oh, yes, I was technically first before you. Always at one.
Right.
Oh, right then. Yes, can I just begin by thanking Rachel and everyone else for the report yet again. I did follow the proceedings of this committee very closely along with Councillor Cox, and as Councillor Higgins will remember, I occasionally popped up in the public gallery because it's a vital core task for our council to keep focused on this particular job. I just have one small question really, and it's just to aid my understanding, and it's not in the body of the main report but in your covering report at paragraph 7.1, because I don't, maybe me, I don't quite understand this, where you say should allow the committee to develop independent assurance. Is that the committee's independent assurance, or is it external audit? I'm not quite certain what that word independent refers to. I apologise if it's me being obtuse.
Through you, Chair. Yes, so happy to comment on that. So one of the main reasons that we do the annual internal audit opinion is to inform the annual governance statement, which is on your agenda as the next agenda item. So what we intend is I bring you that audit opinion, and you should then as a committee take that into the annual governance statement review and make sure that you're using that independent assurance to inform your review of the effectiveness of the council's controls, which you are doing through that AGS. So by order of the agenda this evening, you're essentially receiving this opinion and then taking it into the agenda item that follows on the annual governance statement to make sure that tallies essentially with what I'm telling you in this report today. Hope that helps.
So that answer your question? Yes. Right. Thank you. Cliff?
Thank you. I'm new to this committee, so I'm still learning. But this I found this really helpful, so thank you. I note that the summary of audit opinions is sort of across different themes, and you come up with different ratings for different themes that you look at. Is there any continuity or anything that stands out that kind of goes across the themes that is a particular strength or a particular weakness for us? Or is it completely different? Is it all like apples and pears?
Through you, Chair, again. I would say probably in theme 5, we tend to look at more of those cross-cutting reviews because it tends to be more around the enabling services. So things like procurement, compliance, essentially covers all of them, but we will cover it under theme 5, if that makes sense. So previously, under how we have approached it in previous years, we had a separate, there was one that was just corporate policy compliance and cross-cutting reviews. But because of the nature of your themes, it fits quite nicely in theme 5 now, but I would say that's a bit of a cross-cutting element. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Mason.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one comment really on performance. I looked at the customer feedback and the comments made, and I'd just like to congratulate the internal audit. I think they were a splendid set of results. Thank you.
Thank you.
I keep meaning to put this on and off. Recommendation is just to be noted. So we do not have to vote on this. It's just to be noted. Draft annual governance statement. I think we have Clive, please.
Thank you, Chair. Those members who were previously part of this committee, you're probably familiar with this, and I think it has some wider visibility across the council. As the title suggests, it's an annual process that we have to go through. This is set out in legislation that requires this annual review of our systems of control. And as the head of internal audit said a moment ago, her opinion is one of the things that influences the content of the statement. Just to say a few things about the format and the approach that's taken in compiling this prior to getting into the detail. First, as I said, is a statutory requirement. We also have to follow some guidance which is issued in relation to how we compile this document. So this year's is very slightly revised. That reflects the new guidance, and we've trimmed down the content significantly, and that's because we are also carrying out a review of our corporate governance statement. So we will have more detail in that and less in this document. And I think that's helpful in several ways because it enables you to get to the detail of this rather than reading pages and pages of repeated information. The process that's taken to compile this spreads across various parts of the authority. So as I mentioned a moment ago, it looks at the role of internal audit feeding into that and our internal control. But we also undertake other steps. So every member of the senior leadership team undertakes a process of preparing an annual statement, which gives assurance around their areas of responsibility and highlights any issues of concern. So that's one point that feeds in. Then we get the feed in from audit. We also then review that as a senior leadership team. We consider the council's risk registers for each service area and its corporate risk registers and feed into the process on that. Having done that, the council looks at areas where there appears to be a risk or concern. Those are highlighted and those start on page 63 of the report. And it takes a simple process of whose directorate it is, what's the issue, what action are we proposing, and then who's responsible for taking that action. Obviously, you may want to look into the different themes there in a moment, but then before doing so, if I take you to the final part of the document, that is looking at what was in the previous statement and what actions we've undertaken to address the issues that were raised at that time. So the idea being that you're keeping a constant review. What do we do about the issues last year? And you keep those under review and there may be further actions you wish to undertake. At this stage, this is a draft document. We have to publish it when we publish our statement of accounts. This committee then reviews it, and then our external auditors review and comment and contribute while they're reviewing our statement of accounts. And following that process, when they are in a position to give their statements as to our accounts, then it comes back to the committee, and then you'll look at incorporating any additions or updates based on those processes, and obviously on your own observations that you may wish to make tonight. So that's a sort of summary of the process concerned, and rather than me sort of work through and just sort of read out what's there, it's probably as constructive for members to pick the areas of concern they have and ask any relevant questions. What I would say is that we may not be able to answer every single question here because it may be, depending on those questions, that we need to talk to those in other directorates. But to the extent that we can't answer any queries tonight, then we'll undertake to get back to you and update you as required.
I always think this is very odd. Can we have a proposer for this statement, please? It says here to do it first, but I thought, but I would think a question would be better first. But anyway, it's what it says here, so I'm trying to go. What
Yeah.
is it?
Thank you, Chair. Last year we delayed the annual governance statement from memory because there were some things that this committee weren't entirely happy with. From my own point of view, which has been raised before and across the 28 members as well, I'm surprised that in 2025 and 2026 we haven't got a statement in the directorate regarding the planning service, and I don't know whether that's appropriate in this or not, but I think the reason being is there are parts where it says about effective use of resources, and obviously we had the improvement plan and everything else. The only thing that and I don't want to bring any individual cases up, but what I'm struggling with just as an individual councillor is I'm raising questions and I'm spending more time raising questions and then having non-answers back. And I've just had, while I'm in this meeting, one applicant who has been told by the authority that they were exempt, and I'm not going to go into that particular case, back in November last year. And when I raised this on the 8th of this month, the response is, I'm even more confused now. So no wonder the applicant and their agent are, and it's creating more work for me, which must mean more work for their agent and the applicant. And it's got to be create more work for the planning service. And I just think if direct questions are asked, a direct answer is needed. And sometimes you can say, I don't know that at this moment in time, I will get onto it as well. So I just don't think we're managing the stakeholders, which that to me is causing an issue with the effectiveness use of resources, because it's not effective use of my resources now. I now feel as if I'm a secretary of complaints before I say to the resident or the applicant put in a complaint. So I'm not going to vote for this annual governance statement because I can't believe we haven't got a statement regarding all the improvements we've tried to do in planning. And clearly there's still some teething trouble, but if we're having risks of non-determination or appeals, that's a risk to this authority. And I think we should have a statement on here from that directorate, is my view.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins, for bringing that up. I understand where you're coming from, but I do also understand we are very, very short of staff. Would you like to?
Chair, as mentioned, all members of the senior leadership team prepare their statement of assurance. This was picked up by the relevant director, but because we have that ongoing process, which is looking at the planning service overall, looking at further resourcing, there's new software, there's new processes in place, that was considered as being in hand. And so obviously it may not have all come to fruition yet, but there is a clear action plan to address it. So it's not seen as a risk because we have already taken that action. Where it's something where we'd realised there was a risk but not actually done anything, then it probably would have found its way onto this. And it's just that we are satisfied with the stage we've now reached. And as I say, it may not be perfect, but we do have sort of an end in sight and a very clear objective.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, and thank you for that, Clive. I still think there is a risk, and I think it should be in the document. So I'm not going to vote for the annual governance statement because while I think that has been a plan in place, and there is something going there, there are things that still aren't working. And I get the staff, and I get the difficulty of recruiting staff, but at the moment, when people are asking questions of the planning service, and I'm going to leave it as general as that, the answers aren't coming back. And as I say, it's virtually all my inquiries at the moment, the questions are not being answered. And so then I have now said to the director, I'll have to then send these to yourself, because it's getting, we're losing confidence in major employers in my ward. We're losing confidence in applicants because the question is not being answered. And even if the answer wasn't available, It is to manage the stakeholder, and an explanation would stop the inquiry coming back in, and that's the problem we're having. So I'm not going to vote on the statement because I think that needed to be in here.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. As you know, I don't let things just slide. I do something about them, and I will do what I can, if that's any help to you, and come back to you.
I'm happy to defer this paper, but I'll let other members think about that.
Thank you, Chair. It's two things. The first thing is to follow up on what's just been said. I can't quite understand why the report, which is a draft, can't be amended to take cognizance of the legitimate concerns of members, which has been voiced outside of this committee for a very long time, and I'm sure Councillor Mason would agree with that. Is it a risk? Well, I've heard it described as such by other members, and quite rightly, everyone is trying to do something about it. You know, everybody's trying to do something about it. So I welcome your comment, but I do think the draft, if there was an undertaking to amend it to include that in some way, that might enable us all to vote for it. Now, the second thing I wanted to raise was on page 58, if I remember. And there's a slight leitmotif running through other reports tonight. If you look at the executive summary, overall opinion and conclusion, the second paragraph in, the council was in the process of reviewing its code of corporate governance for the period from 2026 to 2029, etc., etc. Now, my point is simply this. We are in the process of local government reform. And if the leader of the council had the sense to table a discussion on LGR at the last council meeting, this point and many others could have been raised, because this is one of many things where I think we need to be contemplative about the fact that by the time we get to 2029, we won't exist. And therefore, there should be some, in all the wording of all the reports, there should be some reference to that fact so that we can decide whether or not really we can have a document that says this will run until a point after we no longer exist. It may be that we can. I'm not saying that in every case we can't do that. I'm sure the monitoring officer will explain why, you know, things that we agree will continue into the successor body, you know, whether it's a contract for replacing roof tiles on council houses or whatever. But we need to have that discussion. So I just need some reassurance on that particular paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know what's happening there. It's all gone mad. But there's things going on. There's little people around. Risk. Oh, now we're all right. Right, I'll ask Clive to elaborate on that. And I see your point. I was talking about this only the other day, and we have got to live like I did at scrutiny. We have got to live as though 29 isn't happening, but we also know that 29 is happening. But we have to work as we're working yearly, haven't we, as well? That's that.
Yeah, Chair, as I mentioned, the Code of Corporate Governance is based on guidance that's issued that the Council has to have regard to, and that says that you carry out the review every 3 years for a 3-year period. So we're doing it in line with that, and whilst accept the point fully that things look very much on course for vesting date to be in 2028, it would be a bit, I think, remiss is a great word for it. It would be remiss to say, well, we'll do one to 2028, and then if for any reason vesting date were to change, then we don't have a corporate governance, and one of the first jobs we have to do is do another one. So as with so many of those things, it would fall by the wayside, and the new authority would have to have its own code of corporate governance. And obviously that's something to be worked on through the implementation team. But so this is possibly a bit of a belt and braces just in case. If it were to be deferred for 2 years, we still have to do it again, but I don't think that's very likely.
Yeah, just to remind members as well, the annual governance statement is governance focused. It's not the risk register. So if something is a risk, that should be in the strategic risk register. This is around governance risk. I'm not calling on what you've commented on what should go in, but we need to remember that, otherwise we'll replicate the risk register in there.
Thank you. Yeah, because with the governance part of it, I think there are still failings in the governance of the department I've just mentioned, and that's why we're having multiple contacts. You know, what I hear from other colleagues, I just know my post bag of planning has gone out of control now, in my view, and I ask questions and the answers. Well, I've said my point. So I think there is a governance issue. I think it leads into a risk and non-determination and everything else. But yeah.
Thank you for that, Councillor Higgins. I am aware. Thank the cliff. I'm sorry about that. Carry on.
That's all right, don't worry. You're juggling a lot up there. This is just a point of clarification, and it may be me not understanding things. As I say, I'm new to the committee, but on page 63, at the bottom of the table, corporate services, you've detailed the issue, the loss of deeds and transaction files in the building fire. So means we cannot identify statutory powers under which some land is held. This creates a risk that certain transactions are unenforceable or void. Now, the building fire, is that referring to the building fire of the council offices on Nottingham Road? Is that what it's referring to? Or is it just in general a theoretical fire, or what are we referring to here? Because that feels like it's a long time ago if the work only commenced in 24-25 to do something about it. And maybe I'm misunderstanding something. So some clarity would be helpful.
Yeah, it is the building fire rather than a speculative or theoretical building fire. One of the reasons is that we were finding that it was more often arising that when we were trying to undertake particular pieces of work, particular land transactions, etc., that we were missing information. We didn't have all our land ownership registered at that time. There are other sources for some of the information, but what became more and more common was that we were having to do individual bits of work and there were gaps. And so there's been a sort of refocus on that to try and make sure that we do as much as we can to fill those gaps, if that's the way to describe it. And bearing in mind we have some big projects underway at the moment, it was thought appropriate to put it onto the annual governance statement, because obviously there was a theoretical risk of not having vital information which would help underpin those, or the absence of which might affect those projects.
Thank you, that's helpful. I just find it astonishing that didn't occur in anyone's thought processes before 2024. Maybe it was just maybe I'm being naive, but it feels like a very long gap between the fire happening and 2024. That's all. Maybe that's just me though. I don't know.
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to the conversation, I just wonder if it's worth me providing just a little bit of context, because Clive has referred a number of times to, we will actually audit this as part of the audit of the financial statements. And while we don't do lots and lots of work on the annual governance statements, Clive has referred to that guidance that you need to follow. So from our perspective as auditors, we will be in terms of what a significant governance issue is, which is one that would generally materially affect the authority's ability to achieve safeguard public funds or maintain public confidence. That's one of the definitions. So when we look about the completeness of that statement and whether those significant governance issues have been in there, we will consider that against the statements that the various directors have provided. So just worth remembering that we're talking about significant governance issues. So we will look at that as part of the audit. And I just, given the conversations that have happened, Chair, I just thought that bit of context might be useful for you.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just take people back a little on this. The performance or non-performance of asset management I described as a golden thread that ran through a lot of the information that appeared last time in this. In fact, it appeared on the external and an internal audit report. I want to look at this annual government statement. Nothing's happened. Nothing's got there yet. I've been through the lack of registration of title, and even to the point where I did propose, and it was accepted by this committee, that whatever happens with regards to the outcome of the asset management review, that it goes to scrutiny committee. And that's still open as far as I'm concerned. It's never gone there because it's never been completed. I can't support, I can't keep supporting papers that are going to do something. I can't agree to agree all the time. And I need some reassurance that something will happen with regards to review of asset management. And it has happened. If we've got unregistered property, if we can't produce documents that enable us to do the work of keeping this borough viable and on track, and it seems to me that we can't, if we haven't got title registered, then I'm afraid I can't support it. And that's the end of the story. And I'm tired of saying the same story. This is it over and over again. But thank you very much. I just want to say that.
I hope this comes across the right way. I think that rather proves the point of this statement, because this isn't saying the problem is solved. This is saying these are issues of concern. So I accept your point fully in that if there's an issue, we want to address it. But the fact that if it's an issue of that level of magnitude, that you want to have it on this statement so there is absolute oversight of it, the external auditors will comment further on that as part of their process. And it may be, obviously, we're not at that point yet, but it may be that as a result of that, further steps are recommended to actually address it. So I think, as I say, the answer isn't, or the purpose of this document isn't always to say it's all in hand, everything's sorted. It's it's about giving visibility and deciding what we need to do about those risks.
That's fine. I've said that, but this is like deja vu. This is, I've been here before. It's a Groundhog Day as far as I'm concerned. I've had exactly the same set of words repeated at me on asset management, and I looked at my profile, and very soon, on May the 10th, 2027, I will cease to be a councillor. That's what it says on my profile. And strange enough, that's my birthday. And I'm looking forward to it, because I still believe that this will be not settled at that point, and we need to get asset management settled. And it's a recurring theme. it's recorded here, but nothing happens. Now, surely, if we're going to audit something, it has to be a positive thing. You can't audit something that's negatively not there. It has to be positive. When will it happen? When will we see something where we can then look at it and then it can go to scrutiny to make certain that it is all the issues are resolved and are dealt with? That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Councillor Mason, if I take everything on board that you've said, can I then talk between us, and I will do my best to actually come back, probably not with a complete answer, but I will come back. Will that help?
I should leave it in your safe hands, Chair. But you don't only come back. Can you come back with a positive answer of some description? That's all I require. That it will be done, that we understand it, because I don't want to come back with it and say that it's still on the annual government and it gets kicked into long grass all the time. There's no grass now because of the weather. I want to see it loud and clear what we will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mason has stolen most of my thunder, but I do forgive me, I can't remember your name, but our external auditor mentioned that it's got to be of significance, in terms of whatever we're examining, and I take that point on board. It can't be something trivial, but there is a theme here to do with asset management, which I can't quite see in the box that was referred to by Councillor Cliff, but nevertheless, it's a real one, and we've struggled with this. I found that the asset register was very poor when I came on this council, but more than that, there were some leases that were very poor or non-existent, and there was some income that we were losing, and that's my reference to the significant bit, particularly at the stockyard. And we did have a scrutiny meeting on that in closed session. So it is a significant feature, and I welcome your response to Councillor Mason, Chair.
Can we now go to the vote? I don't need a microphone, do I? Can we now go to the vote? All in favour? Oh,
Well, I'm going to propose that we defer this based on the comments made at the meeting.
oh.
Sorry, I was just going to add, I mean, the document has been published because we had to statutory publish it with the statement of accounts. What I might suggest, to be honest, is that you could go away through the chair, liaise over what you would like to amend in here, and then we can amend the document and bring it back as the final with any amendments incorporated into it. So that is something we certainly did last year when there was some amendments that the committee wanted to see.
We did do that because there was only one part last year, which was quite significant, and members did think the wording was right. So my reason for deferring is because I think the governance of the planning directorate needed to be in here on the 31st of March, because we were still in the position we were in on the 31st of March, and it should be in here. And I think Councillor Mason and Councillor Ornett are saying about asset management. So if we could defer that particular, well, I'm happy to propose the paper with subject to liaising with yourself on those two particular points, and I think officers have got it down.
I'm not wanting to defer you.
To be fair, is like Dawn has raised, is I'm happy with everything in the paper. What's in the paper? What's not in the paper I'm not happy with, and I think comments need to be made regarding what I've raised about from the directorate that is involved with planning up to the 31st of March. And then Councillor Mason, I believe, has obviously said about asset management.
Proposer and the seconder. Proposed by Councillor Higgins, seconded by Councillor Audit, and hopefully we will get this sorted out. I much prefer to get things sorted out. Like on planning, if you defer something, you often get something a lot better, don't you? So now then, could I have a
Yeah, if I may, what we're suggesting is that we agree the paper subject to some amendments, which will be done through the chair and the officers.
I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. Yeah, with some amendment.
Jim, I'd like to see planning have a comment in here of its governance arrangements up to the 31st, and you said about assets. So that's what my proposal is.
So now we'll go back and with the amendments, hopefully that we will get what we want with the amendments. And so can I have for or against? Thank you. Right, now we're on to, have you got to go? Yes, right, thank you. Agenda item 7, which is Rachel again. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the internal audit progress report. So for the benefit of new members of the committee, I will bring a progress report to every meeting of this committee. So this essentially provides an update on the activity of internal audit since the last progress update. So this continues throughout the financial year. So we work to an internal audit plan. So the plan was approved by this committee on the 31st of March for 26-27. So a copy of that plan is provided on page 85 of your pack this evening, with the status of each of those audits at the time of producing this report. Since the last committee update, we have finalised 7 further audit reports. So those are detailed for you. We provide a brief overview of each of those within the progress reports. So these are in section 2.5 of the appendix from page 76 of your pack. So we have finalised 7 audit reports this time, which were all 25-26 audits. So they have already been summarised for you in the annual report that you received earlier on the agenda. But these are the full executive summaries for each of those audits. So hopefully provides you with a bit more understanding of the basis for the opinions that we gave. None of those have given opinion of less than moderate assurance, as mentioned earlier. So as there are 7, I don't intend to go into each of these as detail, and I will take it as read, but I'll just walk members briefly through the pack this evening. So on page 77, we mentioned the antisocial behaviour audit. So members might recall at the last committee meeting, we mentioned that this had actually grown in scope because essentially we were auditing processes both within the community safety team, but also within the council's own housing management team as well. So we've brought together all of the findings, and this is why there's a lengthier overview for you today. Overall, processes were operating. However, we have identified a number of areas where controls could be strengthened. So in particular, in the community safety side, we looked at the need for documentation of risk assessments, for example, to ensure we're complying with good practice, and also to ensure that spot checks are taking place to provide some assurance over the quality of the work. Similarly, we have also recommended that management spot checks be formalised for the housing cases. And we also recommended some further improvements around things like the adoption of a neighbourhood management policy, which is not a statutory requirement, but is mentioned in good practice as an advisory requirement. So overall, based on our findings, we've given an assurance opinion of moderate for the control environment and for compliance, and a medium organisational impact. And there are a number of actions that are being taken forward to address those findings. The next related to landlord health and safety. So this is an audit that we tend to do on an annual basis because it's so crucial in terms of the council's risks. So this essentially deals with compliance checks and servicing of gas safety equipment, for example, electrical installation, condition reports, ensuring that smoke and carbon monoxide detectors are in place, and asbestos checks and so on, and servicing of lifts and other equipment for communal areas. And this relates purely to our housing, our social housing stock. So I'm pleased to say that we have given a good level of assurance this year for both the control environment and the compliance. When we conducted sample testing to verify the accuracy of the performance, we had 100% compliance on all of the cases we tested. We also did some additional testing around the controls that had been implemented since October for the handling of damp and mould cases following the new legislation that came into place. And we're giving some positive assurances in how this is being taken forward. We also made some recommendations around how the council needs to ensure a clear audit trail for any cases that remained open, particularly where it's due to access issues. So overall, as I say, a good level of assurance on the audit. The next was a project-related audit, so related to the asset development programme. So members of the previous audit committee might recall that this received a limited assurance opinion in 24-25. So we've revisited this year. It has now received a moderate assurance opinion. We were able to see some improvements in terms of the project management and governance arrangements in particular. We still had some concerns around the reporting throughout the year, for example, highlight reporting, which hadn't taken place as we would have expected, and some gaps in some of the documentation. So we have given a moderate assurance opinion, and with still some recommendations to take forward in relation to the governance arrangements for that project. The next related to key financial controls, so moving on to page 81 of the pack. So this again is an annual audit, so we look at different financial controls each year. This year we looked at debt recovery and sundry debtors, but we also included in that housing benefit overpayments. We also looked at billing on housing rents, which is an area we haven't looked at for a number of years. And we also looked at the key controls around bank reconciliations, given that's such a fundamental control for the financial systems. So the findings are set out, as I say, within the report. There was no areas of particular concern. Bank reconciliations had recently been brought up to date at the time of the audit, and we were able to give assurance around the rent property database being reconciled to the rents that were being charged. So no significant issues there, and a good level of assurance for the control environment and compliance with a low impact. The next was also an annual audit that we tend to do towards the end of the financial year, which looks at compliance with the council's contract procedure rules and the Procurement Act requirements. We did identify a number of areas for improvement in terms of compliance in this area, including the need to look at aggregate spend with individual suppliers, and to ensure that the contract register is complete and accurate. So we have made a number of recommendations here, and some of the recommendations from the previous year also remained open and overdue. So we have given a moderate assurance opinion on the audit, and there are again a number of actions being taken forward to address those areas. And the next related to private sector housing from page 82. So this was looking at the council's delivery of its statutory duties under the Housing Act, and looking at also preparation for the changes around the Renters' Rights Act and the requirements for the council in terms of enforcement under that. So we could see that there had been work underway to prepare for this. There had been an external review which had resulted in an action plan, but unfortunately those actions had not progressed as much as we would have expected at this time. So we did make some recommendations around greater reporting on progress in this area. We also identified some gaps in record keeping and some of the standard processes and controls that we tested. So again, those are how subject to actions are being taken forward, which will hopefully be supported by the implementation of an upgraded system during 26-27. We did also recommend some periodic spot checks to make sure that these are being complied within the interim period. The next related to disaster recovery, so on page 84 of the pack. Now, just to mention that this relates to the Leicestershire ICT partnership that the council is partner in with Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council. So for here, this was a joint audit that we conducted on behalf of the partnership, and we alternate the delivery of those audits each year. So the focus this year was on disaster recovery. Some of the recommendations related to Melton, some related to Hinckley and Bosworth, and some were joint for the IT service. So there is some recommendations around formally approving the disaster recovery plan to ensure that we have that robust framework in place. And we've given a moderate level of assurance overall for the control environment and compliance, and actions are being taken forward in those areas. So in terms of the audit plan itself, as I say, is from page 85, covers the 26-27 audit plan. So I can give the committee assurance that we are progressing the Q1 audits, with one audit report at draft report stage at the time of producing this report, and other audits progressing well to make sure that we remain on schedule for this year. As I mentioned in my previous agenda item, you also have an update on the implementation of audit recommendations. So on page 90, there is an updated position on those outstanding actions. So we had 28 actions overall which were overdue. 19 of those were either high or medium priority, and 27 of that 28 are over 3 months overdue. We do continue to monitor this, and as you've seen from the annual report, it is something that informs the annual opinion. And I know that it's something that management team are focused on, making sure that we improve compliance in this area as well. So there was one action that fell into the category of being high priority and over 3 months overdue. And if any fall into that box, I give full details to this committee so that you can see any progress that needs to be made. So in Appendix 3 on page 91 of the pack, you have full details of that one action which related to asset management, and the comments in the latest update column, which starts July 26, are the latest comments we have received from the officers around this action. We follow the actions up on a monthly basis, so we will continue to request updates and report back to this committee. And obviously, if there's any questions, I can always take those away as well. So I'm happy to take questions, Chair, on any of the content of the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Audit.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me for being out the room briefly. I have read the report thoroughly, which is a very good report, as you always. Yes. I want to return to my theme for the night, which is LGR, with the proviso that I understand the monitoring officer's comments, which is, I accept that fully. And within the context of this report, normally that would be the case. However, if you just go to page 72, where we say there are no implications arising directly. So let's compromise on my views and say there's a lot of indirect consequences here. And if you cross-relate that to the paragraph above, where we say there are some things like the litany in the Church of England, there are some things we've done which we perhaps haven't done properly, and a lot of things we haven't done which we ought to do. So it's there's a lot of work going on, and I respect that, and you can't do everything all at once. So there's a big effort going on, but we come back to this point, don't we, that LGR, like the sword of Damocles, is there, and so I think, with due respect to the officers, I think we're being a little bit complacent about that. I think that the pace at which we can go is going to be affected by this. We see this already with comments about corporate plans and so on, and indeed I think I think Councillor, get a name, Pat Cumbers and I did a piece of work before Christmas going into January with officers about the number of policies that we have, which are enormous, many of which are up for review, many of which are overdue for review. So taking, as what I've said before, it's not that the steps are complicated, it's the sheer quantity of work that's got to be done. It's the officers have got an enormous task on their hand. So I think that's all I want to say on this, really. That I think there's a lot more to it. It's like the iceberg, there's a little bit on top, which we're happy with, but the big bit underneath is like to sink the ship if we're not careful.
You're saying there's a lot of icing, but it's really the main bit in the middle, isn't it? Yeah,
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the recommendation within the report, so there were no implications for LGR arising from this particular report. It is something that we will be bearing in mind in the scoping of every audit in the 26-27 audit plan, and I think that's something that I discussed with the committee when we agreed the audit plan. So that's something we are factoring into the scope. So if anything comes out of that in terms of the audits in the 26 to 27 audit plan that I think has any particular implication for LGR, I will start to flag that within this section of the report, and I'd be more than happy to ensure that that's taken forward. In terms of the reports on this agenda, as I say, these were all 25-26 audit reports, so we hadn't implemented that at that point, but hopefully that gives some reassurance around how we will use that section going forward.
I think it's probably more of a question for Clive. I noticed in the, let me find it, the Procurement Act of 2023, it says in the report it's not been amended in our constitution. Is there plans to update that?
Those are all rewritten, and there is just one piece of work that needs to be done, which is a link, which is, now I'm trying to remember the detail, but basically it's having an internal version set up so officers can access the link, but it's not a public facing link. So once we've got that sorted, we'll be publishing those. So it is already, but actually that's a useful reminder for me to chase that up.
Or questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just looking here, that I'm just want Rachel to just go through Appendix 4, limitation and responsibilities. Can you go through that again for us now and just make what it really, in your words, can I have it in simple words for myself? How it reads out now. I've read it 2 or 3 times. I'm just not too sure what it's about.
That's no problem. Through you, Chair. I'm on that. So that is a standard wording that we include within each of our progress reports. So under the internal audit standards, we have to be very clear on what we're giving an opinion on, so that it can't be interpreted or used for other purposes or to inform others that are beyond the council, I suppose. So within this, we've tried to be clear on what the opinion is based on, and the fact that if we've tested something during the period, so we may have tested something from 1st of March to the end of June, we may have tested it. If something changed after that and we are now reporting on the outcome, obviously we can only report on what was in place at the time of the audit. So it's just putting those limitations in place around what we are telling you and what you can read into our assurances, just so that we're not being taken to give you assurances that we shouldn't be, if that makes sense. So we have to cover ourselves to ensure that anything we reported on is taken in the right way. So it goes through things like the internal control. Clearly, we work on a sample basis as well. So it may well be when we look at something, there's a population of 1,000, we will sample check usually around 30, if that's the case, or at least 25. But clearly, if there's 1 or 2 in there, we may not pick the ones that we're wrong. So we do try to do as much analysis we can to look at the higher risk items and try and target areas that we need to, but ultimately we can never give a full assurance opinion, if that makes sense. So we do it as far as we can, but we can't ever give full assurance that there are no errors or non-compliance in the sample. That help?
Answer. Thank you. Councillor Orson.
Yeah, just one last question. When it comes to the testing of procurement activity, obviously there's been a number of instances of lack of procurement documentation, and without formal contracts and such. Have there been any changes to stop this happening the following year?
You, Chair. I think that's probably one for officers to comment on, but just to give a little bit of insight as to the testing that we've done. So we try to test both a sample of spend, but also a sample from the contract register, so that we're approaching it from different angles. Clearly, we've identified a number of areas for improvement. There is an action plan in place, which management have signed up to. So I'd like to think that that's being taken forward, but I might not be the best person to comment on progress to date.
I can't comment on progress to date off the top of my head, but I do know that the senior management team have got this on the forward plan to review regularly throughout the year. I think the issue is with the procurement, it's not just focused on one individual team. Whilst we have a procurement unit, it requires every service to comply, then it's very difficult to know necessarily at the centre what's happening in each of those service areas, which is why we've got it on the management team agenda so that we can get that assurance of everybody and all of the services.
Chair, your permission, it's going back to the previous point that Councillor also made. The contract procedurals that are on that are published now, they do have reference to the 2023 Act. They were updated in August last year, but there was a further small update to do, so they're nearly there. So they're not entirely lacking. It's just those few small points, and it's largely around the links. I've just had a look, and they don't actually work in this, so it's just a small tweak, but we will follow it up.
Any other questions? I think we note this report then. I think you can hear me regardless of whether it's switched on or not. Pardon?
It won't record.
Yeah, no, I know it won't. Yeah, right. I think we're on agenda item 8, which is our treasurer, Dawn.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And just note that because of the interest, the Chief Internal Auditor is leaving for this item. So the current delegation for the provision of internal audit services expires in March 2027, and this report requests a 2-year extension, although recognising that should local government reorganisation go ahead as intended on the 1st of April 28, that delegation would fall away at that time, and alternative arrangements would need to be entered into by the new authority. The approval to delegate must be made by council, and therefore this is a recommendation by this council, by this committee to the council. As noted earlier on one of the earlier agenda items by Councillor Mason, the internal audit service is a high performing one, and therefore it is my recommendation that the service should be extended as set out in the report. Thank you.
Councillor on it.
Thank you for Dawn reminding me that I don't need to make the point, so I won't make it about LGR. But can I just comment en passant? Northamptonshire as a block went through reorganisation some time ago, and it got into a bit of a muddle, should we say, dispassionately. But it did get into a bit of a muddle. So it's a bit ironic to me that North Northamptonshire Council is doing this job of work during what will be LGR. So I hope that in picking this point up about the impact of LGR generally, we will learn some other lessons. And no doubt when the new Prime Minister gets round to giving us a region as well as a council, we will have to decide whether we go north or south. And that will be an interesting debate for another day. Thank you.
Cheers. I think. Pardon? Yes, you've got to move it. Yeah. Right, and seconded. Yeah, right, thank you. All in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And now, and I know you've been waiting a long time, I'm sorry about that. We probably ought to have put you first, seeing that you've got to go to Warwickshire. Could Helen, can you give your report, please?
Certainly, thanks, Chair. And yes, we would always stay for the full committee anyway, just to listen to the debate and offer our thoughts if there are any points that are helpful. So not a problem to be at the end of the agenda. So what you have in front of you tonight is a report which is about regaining assurance. Those members who have been on the committee previously will have heard me talk at length about the place we find ourselves in the audit market, and you have been subject to a number of years of disclaimed audits. Worth pointing out that you are certainly not alone in that. As a result of that position, and that position nationally, clearly there is a level of interest from MHCLG around how do we get to a position where we can start to issue clean opinions on all of those councils that find themselves with a number of years of disclaimed audit opinions. So this report summarises the report that I've had to give to MHCLG. MHCLG have set out a number of different categories. So for every council that has a number of years disclaimed opinions, us as auditors have had to classify where we think you sit in those categories. You will note that we have placed you in category C. Now, category C is essentially, and I shall paraphrase this into simple words. Category C is the category really where I feel as your engagement lead on your audit that with the appropriate resources in place, that it would be possible to get you back to a position of a clean audit opinion by the time we hit that magical LGR point that we've talked about. The reason for some of those judgments is we have been able to spend the last 2 years since we've been your auditor starting to rebuild that assurance. You'll recall that for those 2 years, we've managed to complete all of the work in terms of in-year transactions. We've managed to look at the balances that are effectively isolated to that year. The issue that we've continued to talk about is how do we fill that gap for the 3 years where you didn't have any audit assurance. Now, it's something that Dawn and I have talked about quite regularly, and to be able to be in that position, both us as an audit firm, but equally you as a council need to have the resources in place and need to have the knowledge in place that should we need to go back into those transactions for those years that haven't been audited, that we can actually start to look at those. Now, what I am not saying we need to do to rebuild assurance is we need to go back and do 3 years worth of full audits on those transactions. But we are required to do enough for that to understand that that cumulative position that has continued to build is right, because those are the foundations of the accounts. So given the changes that you've experienced probably over the last 5 months in terms of the finance team that you currently find yourselves in, we don't think that you are in a position from a capacity point of view to be able to sort of support that work that needs to happen to get to a clean opinion. So we are going to continue to focus our efforts on what is an in-year audit, which is what we've done for the last 2 years. And I think recognising that if you think back the last 2 years, we've managed to achieve that by that statutory backstop date, which was February, and we have achieved that in February. That legal statutory date continues to come forward. It will be January, but we have decided to go for the November date, which is the following year, because we need to demonstrate that that November date is achievable. So what we are asking you for this year is to not get the accounts audited and signed off by February. We're asking you to do that by the end of November. So that is 3 months earlier than we have done last year. And that is against a backdrop of having, you have a complement of finance team, but they are all new or changed. and don't have that historic knowledge. So the in-year transactions for this year is still going to be a bit of a challenge, I think it's fair to say, which is why I think as your engagement lead that category C is the right category, and it's something that Dawn and I have discussed and agreed that that is the appropriate category. But it's important for you as those charged with governance to actually understand that category, and that's why I brought that report to you this evening. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Are there any questions? Right, Councillor Cliff.
Right, just for my education and for the education of anybody who may be sad enough to be following this online, category C, can you just talk a little bit more about what that actually is compared to other potential categories that we could be put in? Thank you.
So there are essentially four categories. And so category A's and category B's are the categories that we think as auditors that we can do enough work to actually get back to a position where we could issue a clean opinion. So typically, if you think about the national picture, there are a very, very small number of councils and authorities across the land that have actually moved out of having a disclaimed audit opinion to having a clean audit opinion. Those are typically really small, really straightforward type authorities, largely that are single services. So where we've had most success in sort of shifting that dial from a disclaimed opinion to a clean opinion, there have been police authorities or fire authorities, but there are still a very small number that have managed to achieve that. But the category A and the category Bs are those that we think if we invest the resources in, we can get to a point where we can change that opinion from a disclaimed to a clean opinion. Your category C is the category you're in, which I've described, which is one that we think from our risk assessment that if we could do that additional work and you as a council had the resources to support that, we could probably get you to that position over the next 3 years before LGR. Category D is the sort of final category. In category D is the category where, as auditors, we think that it is highly unlikely that we would get to a position where we would be able to issue a clean opinion. And most of the reasons for that are, it could be that there are just the sheer number of years that haven't had any audit assurance. So there are councils up there across the land that have got more years without an audit opinion than you have. There are also councils that have had major systems failures in that time. So if they had a system failure, even if we could go back and we could invest the time, the record just might not be there for us to be able to get the assurance we need. So that's that sort of category where we just genuinely don't think we'd be able to get back to a position as clean, whereas yours is one about having the resources to actually get back to where you need to get back to. Does that answer your question?
I think Councillor Allnut.
I did have one small question. I can't for the life of me remember what PSAA stands for. I do wish there was a. Could you just answer that? And then I'll.
Yeah, I like the easy ones. It's public sector audit appointments, and they are the people that award the contracts to the different suppliers. So as Grant Thornton, we don't contract directly with you as Melton. We're part of a large framework contract, and PSAA have determined that we should be your auditors. So it's through that framework.
A very good choice it was too. Just a comment. I mean, the state of audit, as has been mentioned, was a disaster for well over a decade, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector too. Several companies failed to be audited on time and ran into difficulty. And of course, our government also abolished the National Audit Office, which I think was a profound error of judgment for other reasons. And your report clearly indicates the length of time going back to 2021. And I've said before, sitting here on other occasions, that our staff under Dawn have done a remarkably good job in catching up. I think in the first year you clearly demonstrated that, didn't you, Dawn? So saving her blushes. D is disaster, but C is we're going to get there, and I think we should have a bit of confidence that we can do it, even though it'll be a lot of hard work. Go on then.
So yeah, just to clarify, it would be possible, but I think what we are saying is with the current resources that the council has, that we are saying it's not possible. So the only way you would get back to a clean opinion within that time frame is if, as a council, you were able to invest more finance resources to be able to support that process. And the decision you need to consider is whether in the current environment that is something you want to do. Equally, knowing that you have lost a number of members of staff who have that cumulative knowledge from the years that weren't audited, how realistic is that? That's not my decision to make, but I think it's an important decision and distinction to sort of point out.
A question and a comment. The comment is we've heard from the new leader that lots of resources are going into these things, so I'm confident that he'll be up to his word. But can I ask this question: what is the risk to us as a council if we just can't do that? Do the bailiffs come in? Do we get the government running the council for us? Are we surcharged? You know, the point is, if we can't do something, if you can't save a life, you can't be accused of murder. You're just trying to rescue the person. So what are the consequences of failing to do that then?
So again, I think what the report that MHCRG have asked us to do is about them fact finding and about them understanding the current position. So really trying to understand how many of those councils out there that have got disclaimed audit opinions are because of something really fundamental that the audit profession don't think we can fix. So how many of those, so those are your category Ds, how many are actually out there? Then there's that other category that you fall into, which is about what does the risk assessment say? Does the risk assessment suggest there's anything really fundamental that would stop us? Or is it about the sheer, you've used the term as well already, the sheer volume of things that need to happen? And that's the situation that you are in. So this is part of a fact-finding exercise, and this is about them understanding the picture. Going forward into LGR, what the new bodies will need to think about is what are the accounts and what are the audit positions telling them about the balances they are inheriting. And you will form part of a much wider picture. So it will be about thinking for that new body, how many of those balances that new body is inheriting hasn't got any audit assurance over it. If you start to think about where you're going in terms of Leicestershire, so Leicester County has had clean opinions. They're not in a disclaimed position. Neither is Leicester City. Neither is Rutland. So the three, what I would call larger ones, when you start to move through, then you are not alone then in terms of disclaimed opinions. So then it becomes a decision for that new body in terms of what are the different positions saying. Now they, you could, and then you have to sort of risk assess the balances. So what we are trying to do for you, given we know we can't go back over the years that were just not audited, but what we can do is we continue to keep up with that annual cycle, because actually the newer transactions then we are at least giving a level of assurance over. We're not going back and I'm going to say getting some assurance that the foundations are actually there, but we are starting to build up that picture of assurance of that in-year position. So I'm not saying it's not without consequence, but I think I would be far more concerned if I was telling you were in a category D. And I think that's probably I know that's probably not an answer to your question, but it just probably frames the sort of position that we're in and what we're dealing with.
Dawn would like to say something now.
I think just to add to what Helen's saying, I mean, obviously we've discussed this, and I'm not sure how many of the members of this committee are aware of what. Sorry, microphone went off. We've had 100% turnover of the accountancy team since last November. So there's 5 members in accountancy and all of them have turned over since last November. We've been out to recruitment. We could not recruit people with the breadth of skills that a small district council needs. So we're now staffed with a mix of agency and new staff that are coming on board in the next few weeks, but those staff will need a lot of training and development to understand, as I say, the breadth of experience and skills and knowledge you need in a small district council, as opposed to a larger council where they would be focused perhaps more on just budget monitoring. Also as well, we had a long-term deputy 151 officer who left us in January 25. The new person who started has only been in post just over a year and also leaves us at the end of this month. And we're not recruiting, we're using agency for that as well. So even if we wanted to put considerable extra resources over and above what we're already investing to keep the ship going, those resources we would have absolutely nobody that was here when those transactions and those accounts were closed. And that's the issue. With the best will in the world, no matter how many resources and how much money you spend, those staff would not, there was no continuity of anyone that was here when those accounts were closed. So in terms of just taking this alongside the other risks, my priorities are getting the budget monitoring done, focusing on business as usual, investing, making sure we generate treasury management returns, supporting finances for LGR, and basically supporting finances for options appraisal, project support, etc., etc. So that is my priorities and where I would say our resources need to be spent, not on trying to gain assurance. In terms of that bigger picture across LGR already, the finance group for LGR are already talking about who is capable of being in category A and B and therefore resulting in a clean opinion. And once we know which of those councils up to March 28 can get a clean opinion, if it is only the likes of Melton's balances, we could be immaterial to the opinion of that new authority. So we're starting to look at that and gaining that opinion of who can get to that point. If that becomes a dire position and there are multiple councils that are in that boat, then that will be an issue for the transition as well. And do we, as a group, put resources into those authorities? But as I say, for Melton, I still maintain that with no continuity at all, I'm not sure how much resource you could put into Melton and still get that back, because there just isn't anybody there, and they would purely be relying on the quality of those working papers from some years ago to answer those questions.
Presumably, will any of those papers have been lost in the fire, or not?
No, the papers are there.
The leader and the cabinet have got their work cut out.
With regard to regaining assurance, I see in the 25-26, the reserves, there was no assurance. The audit process for 26-27, again, there's no plans to undertake any assurance. Isn't that quite a major thing? And what can we do to build back assurance if we can't audit the reserves?
Yeah, and it is the reserves that's the absolute key to this. The reserves are clearly built up over a number of years, and the ins and outs that have, and for us, and yes, we can what's gone into reserves as a result of the transactions in 23-24. We can gain some assurance over because we did the audit in that year. The same for 24-25, and with the wind in the right direction, the same for 25-26. So, but what happened in terms of those reserves in those years that were not audited, I don't know. And the only way to actually know that is to go back and look at those movements on those reserves, and for us as audit to test them. And that is the piece of work that we're going to struggle to do.
Just to remind members, we're talking about external audit assurance of those reserves or balances brought forward. We still, despite that audit issue, we still, as an authority, produced high quality statement of accounts on time and to deadline with a consistent team that had been in place for a number of years. So from my perspective, I think we had good quality accounts that were accurate and produced. It is just that the auditor cannot, they have not been able to place their reliance on them. But I'm saying that they were good quality and they were produced by staff that had been with us for a considerable number of years.
Are there any more questions? Thank you, Helen, for your report. And I know that we are in very difficult times. I appreciate that. But I also appreciate that Dawn and the team that she has had, she's got, are working extremely well. Dawn is working extremely hard, as is Clive. And yeah, it's not easy. It isn't easy, and I think we've all got to realise that. I think everybody understands that. So this report is to be noted. Any urgent business? I don't think there's any urgent business. Only one thing, that I didn't introduce the councillors. I do apologise, but you won't mind, will you? If there's no other business, I declare the meeting closed at, actually it's slow, it's 2019. Thank you for your attendance.